Hi, my name is Maria Early, and this is my presentation on economic security, focusing on Dillingham and Alaska. One of the biggest factors in economic security is jobs, and unemployment measures how much insecurity there is for people who don't necessarily know where their income is going to come from or how often. And Dillingham is located next to Bristol Bay, so there's a lot of seasonal cycles of employment and unemployment. In the summer months, there's a lot of commercial fishing as well as tourism that takes place that doesn't necessarily continue year round. So the unemployment rate can be tracked in a cycle that changes depending again on the year, but very steadily depending on what month it is. And generally, it's about 8.3% is the unemployment rate in Dillingham census area, which is 1 to 5% higher than the Alaskan average, depending on, again, the year and where in that cycle you are. The median household income is $56,900, which is lower than the US average of $62,800 and much lower than the Alaskan average of $77,600. And that is coming from jobs as well as PFD payments and other sources of income. The taxes are another very complicated factor when it comes to economic security because when there's increased taxes, more money is theoretically going towards providing government services, but at the same time, it's also taking personal income away from households. So in Alaska, the sales tax on goods is lower than the rest of the United States at 6% instead of 7.3%, and there isn't that same income tax that on average is about 4.6% in the rest of the United States. Some updates on economic status of Dillingham as of 2018 is the fish economy was doing really good. There was increased fish returns and good prices that they were getting out of Bristol Bay. However, the cost of living did increase slightly, and this is largely dependent on bringing in outside goods and services. So, whether that be by air or by water, it became a little bit more expensive to bring things into the community. Lowering travel costs to Anchorage did happen when the second airline started offering service to Dillingham, so that actually decreased by about $200. So people who needed medical services from Anchorage or anything else could get there for a little bit cheaper. The state funding in general went down, so people didn't get as much from the permanent fund dividend. And this is money that every Alaskan gets from the state, which again is a whole other story, but the state funding did go down for that because they needed the money for their budget. The total labor force grew, and I broke this down what the total labor force is by percentage. 52% of the labor force was working in the private sector, 37% for local government, and then 4% for state government. And this is a really good thing because as labor force grows and participation grows, then the unemployment rate does go down. So that also is heavily dependent on whether you're measuring people who are actively looking for a job as opposed to those who have kind of given up or aren't officially registered. But it's a really good sign when the labor force participation grows. However, again, related to that cost of living increase, cargo prices, especially for barge and air, did go up. The Bristol Bay Native Association did a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats assessment, which looks at different things and conditions surrounding the region and then turns them into potential strengths and weaknesses and then helps determine courses of action going forwards. So some of the strengths that they identified for Dillingham was that they supply a lot of fish, up to 50% of the world's supply, and so they can really use this strength and build off of that to increase their economic security. Their natural resources are also very valuable as well as the beauty. So like ecotourism is a big thing in the summer. They can capitalize on that by inviting other people to come in and invest money into the community as well as get some benefits out of it. They do have internet access, which is a really good thing, especially in the age of COVID and especially being a little bit far away from Anchorage or other major metropolitan areas. It's good to have connectivity there for telehealth concerns, education, anything like that. And there is quite a bit of subsistence going on in the area, so not everything is going to be actually reflected accurately in government reports and stuff because there's a lot of informal economic activity going on. Some of the weaknesses for this area are the costly transportation of goods and people. Again, just because airfare got a little bit cheaper does not mean it is cheap. Especially trying to get goods into the community can be difficult. There's also high rates of drug and alcohol abuse, especially opioids. They're becoming very problematic. So there has to be a lot of going forward. Again, this turns into an opportunity for programs aimed at targeting substance abuse and reaching out to those who are vulnerable, especially populations such as the elderly and the youth. The high cost of living is a weakness in Dillingham, as well as inadequacy of elder care solutions. So a lot of the elders don't necessarily receive the services that they need to, and that's a place where the government needs to step it up, as well as enable private companies to do better and broaden the options for people who are elderly and at home, especially supporting families. And also, there are limited jobs in the area, especially during the off seasons. So, while someone might have summer employment working at a hotel or working on a boat or something, the rest of the year it's really limited as to what they can do to find a job. And then some of the opportunities do take those same situations and kind of put course of action potential into that. So there is lots of opportunity to reach out to the youth and the elders and to incorporate their knowledge and their wisdom into city planning and government. There's also the opportunity to bring more technology into Dillingham and expand access to education for people and especially job training. The branding of Bristol Bay, especially when it comes to selling fish and bringing outside tourists into the community, branding is a big opportunity, as well as increasing their usage of energy efficiency and capitalizing on renewable energy initiatives in the area. Some threats to the economy in Dillingham are climate change, so that makes things very unstable and unpredictable, especially for a community that relies so much on the surrounding nature and, on Bristol Bay. Drugs and alcohol are an ever-present threat, especially when there are populations who are unemployed or are insecure in where they're going to get their funding. Instead of putting it back into the community into a useful way, a lot of it's going towards drugs and alcohol abuse, which therefore continues a cycle of destroying a lot of the community there. So that can be very problematic. Reliance on an extraction economy, especially in a shifting political environment, can be very much a threat. Again, the costly food, transport, and living expenses, as well as the closing of small schools. So a lot of the school receives state funding, and if state funding is down, then it becomes more difficult to keep those schools open. And then again, pollution can really impact the amount of fish and the natural resources that they actually rely on economically in the region. This is where I got my information from. The Bristol Bay Native Association did an assessment as of 2018, and then few other sources that compared economic statistics. A final note, a lot of this information is coming from pre-COVID information. I couldn't find a lot after COVID, so a lot of these things are going to be changing, especially with state funding and government jobs getting shut down or changed a little bit. So the unemployment rate, I think, has gone higher since COVID, but I'm still looking to see where a lot of the information is going to be coming out soon in the next few years. Things are going to change a lot. Thank you for listening.